Why has this ancient Turkish fortress got me so interested? And what's it got to do with the biblical prophet Elijah? I've just been down quite an amazing rabbit hole, and I want to share it with you. I think you might enjoy it too. This is Egil Castle, otherwise known as Egil Castle, often seen as being that bit at the bottom there, the impressive looking bit that looks like there should be pillars rising up into the sky. But we'll come to that. It's actually the bit at the top. Yes, the bit at the bottom is part of it, but it's that bit at the top. So what is it that initially grabbed my attention? Well, that's easy. I'm constantly on the lookout for places that are like mesas or buttes or a plateau, things like Table Mountain. Oh, obviously Giza fits that description. And so does that amazing place in Sri Lanka, whose name I can't quite remember now. But there's a whole range of these amazing ancient sites, all located in a similar kind of situation. And one of my interests is in these sorts of locations because I'm searching for something. But that's another story. But this is one of the sites that I came across. So I looked this one up, and it's got quite a history to it. And what fascinated me was, as I go further and further down this rabbit hole of this location, it seems to become more and more ancient. And there's some really interesting mythology around it too. So let's get started with the obvious parts. So Egil Castle is considered an Assyrian castle, and it's almost 3,000 years old according to archaeologists. Of course, I think it's a lot older than that, but hey, we'll come to that. It sits on the Tigris. Well, it has the Tigris to the north and a very deep valley in the south. And it's located on a high rocky platform or mesa or butte or plateau or whatever you want to call it. And that's to the east of the town called Egil. The castle is surrounded by two walls, an inner and an outer wall. And as you can see from the pictures, there's not a lot left of it that you can see from the original structures, except those amazing bits at the bottom of the hill. There's a lot of history here. There's some Assyrian reliefs, and there's a lot of rock-cut tombs, as well as some tunnels. It's really quite an interesting structure. Of course, as I've mentioned before, the most interesting part seems to be the bit at the bottom of the hill, because it's got structure that you can see still is there, even though a lot of it has already gone. But it's obvious that this had great pillars leading into the sky. What I find particularly fascinating is that there is these amazing structures that you see that look like the base of pillars, and all around them there are rock-cut tombs, even into some of them, and they really don't have the same look and feel as the actual structure itself. But I digress, and I also make assumptions about what I think might have been there once. So what I would like to talk about now is, were the Assyrians actually the first here? Most of what you read about this place is all about the Assyrians, but there were others that came before. The Assyrians ruled the region between 1260 and 600 BC, so we're looking at maybe up to 3,500 years ago. But there were people before that. Archaeological records speak of Habadians, Hurrians, and Mitanni, who lived there between 3500 BC and when the Assyrians took over. So even though the archaeologists say that the castle itself, or the fortress, is believed to have been built by the Assyrians, there are some that think that bits of it at least were there before the Assyrians turned up. So how far back are we actually looking in terms of some of these structures? Well, there seems to be evidence for there being people there 5000 BC, but considering where this place is located, it couldn't be beyond the pale for archaeologists to eventually discover that maybe it's closer to the Younger Dryas, maybe 10,000 BC. So that would be my guess, actually. We as humanity tend to build on top of other older places for various reasons, which I won't go into right now. The more I dug down into this structure, the more I discovered. And suddenly I found myself down a biblical path, starting to look at the great prophet Elijah and his protege Elisha. So I went down this path because I kept seeing references to this being the city of prophets and other references to the land of prophets. And this all revolves around this one place, Egil, and the fortress. One of the myths that surround this place is the myth that Elisha is entombed here. How can that be, you might say? Surely Elisha is in Sebastia, so that's where there is a tomb with his name on it. But even though that was originally where he was put to rest, there was a man by the name of Julian the Apostate who threatened to find his bones, his remains, and burn them. So there was a group of people who reportedly rescued what was left of him and moved it to a secret location. Many said it was in Alexandria, but according to the myths of Egil Castle, his remains are somewhere in this area. It had been safely underwater for some time, but after water receded, it was found and moved to a safer location. He must have been a fairly important prophet to the people because he was laid alongside people like Obadiah and John the Baptist in the area where his original tomb was located. His secret tomb, however, well, I'm not sure we'll ever know, but it is apparently rumoured to be in this area. So now, what is so exciting about Elisha? Well, there's a lot to say about Elisha because Elisha was the protege of Elijah. And from a biblical perspective, Elijah was one of two prophets that never died and was taken to be with God. So this is relevant because when Elijah was being taken up to God, he gave his powers to Elisha. And then he got on some fiery chariot and ascended into the sky. So Elisha then went on to do a heap of things that Elijah wanted him to be doing. Elijah got on with doing an awful lot of healing and restoration and the laying on of hands and bringing people back from the dead. And, the sorts of miracles that he was required to do. But he also did something in this area, in the area of Egil Castle. And this is how the story goes. The prophet and his army went to Egil to conquer this beautiful city. However, he found that it was impenetrable. And so instead of attempting to conquer it. The legend says that he sat and prayed. The legend said that the castle bowed to the prophet. I'm not sure what that means, but the implication is that something happened and he just walked on in. So far, this doesn't sound terribly magical, but the next part of the story kind of is. Remember I mentioned that before Elijah flew off into the sky in the fiery chariot. So he's given Elijah his cloak, which in some translations is called a mantle, and he's given Elijah his special powers, which are apparently now twofold. And what Elisha does next, look, I'll just read you the passage because it's kind of interesting. In one translation, he uses his coat. So he struck the water with the coat and wondered, will the Lord perform miracles for me as he did for Elijah? As soon as Elisha did this, a dry path opened up through the water and he walked across. In other translations, it's not the coat he used to strike the water with. He just struck the water. We don't know what with, doesn't say whether it was his hand or a rod, but that's when the water parted. As an aside, this is also the same guy with the bald head, where there's those boys yelling at him, baldy, baldy, baldy. And so he gets God to kill 42 boys using 2 bears out of the forest. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange story, that one. Okay, so now back to the important bits. He's parting the water of the River Jordan, and he's doing a heap of miracles. And that's all absolutely fascinating. But what I want to know is, where is that cloak? And if he had a rod, where is that? Is it somewhere in or around Egil Castle? Or is it somewhere else? So, although I think that there could be something magical still located at Egil Castle, I'm coming full circle round and looking at the ancient structure again, because I think there's so much more to this site. And as I was going through Google Maps and looking at it from above and going through all the photos that I could find of it, this picture jumped out at me. And I want to end on this note because, to me, this looks like a pyramid. So what do you all think about all this?